TV.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Cheers. We've got
Cheers.
a
How
little
good are
red
interviews
vino.
with wine? Yeah,
Mm. Ooh.
here
Except when
for
we
it.
both drink at the same time, and then there's
AMSR. Is that what it is?
That's right. That's
Mm.
right. And for anyone watching the YouTube version, they'll get the full experience.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Let's start out by just telling everyone who you are and what you do.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Kay and I run Startup Creative. So I've been doing it for about 10 years. So it's a podcast. I wrote a book called How to Start a Side Hustle, online platform, business coaching events, workshops. Once upon a time, it was a magazine, and it aims to educate, inspire, and grow creative entrepreneurs looking to turn their passions into side hustles or businesses.
So cool.
Yeah, thanks.
This happened. So 10 years ago, because I kind of feel like the word side hustle, like that gets like everyone's talking about that now. Like COVID was kind of the moment of like, I've got to have like other income coming in. People kind of got really aware about it. But 10 years ago, maybe not so much. How did you come up with this?
Yeah, no, 10 years ago, it was very entrepreneurship and startups, but it was kind of like Silicon Valley, like Facebook, Ubers, Airbnbs, and that was like the thing. My background was very random program development, working with kids at risk, advising government on best practice of youth
Wow.
services around Queensland. And I guess when I look back on it, my skill set was taking a concept like, so I used to design alternative learning programs for kids at risk in
Yep.
alternative schools. And so it was like, how do you take schooling that is very kind of like in a traditional sense, linear and, formulaic and, black and white, and teach it to kids who might have different learning styles. And so we would create programs where they, designed football fields and went to Bunnings and things like that.
Cool.
Um, and ended up designing another program that got scaled and, was working in this, what I thought was my dream job, advising government on how to do this on a statewide level, and got pretty burnt out realizing it wasn't really going to change much.
Mm.
And so around that same time was doing some personal development startups, everything, the Tim Ferrisses and the Tony Robbins and the Mel
Yes.
Robbins. Everyone was just like, yes, go after your dreams. And I was so burnt out that I needed someone, I needed that like shameless personal development cheerleader that was like, you can do it. And I realized I had a business coach, which I now do, which I love coaching people because that was the thing that I needed most. And I had this coach and I said, she was actually a career advisor and she helped me like build my career, and I was like, I want to go out on my own and take my skill set but help creative entrepreneurs. Like, this is going to be a thing,
Mm.
and everyone's doing it in this very corporate startup masculine, dominating area. What about all of the creative entrepreneurs? What about the small businesses, the family businesses, the freelancers? Yeah, and I was surrounded by a lot of those people who were like, oh, I wish I could start my own business. And so I was like, you can, let's do it. And so I guess the skill set of program development, of taking an idea and translating it and making it accessible, and also beautiful. Like, I liked nice design and I hated when I went for a Google search for my first business plan, I think it was like 100 pages, black and white, government document. And it made me, within 2 pages, I was like, I can't start a business. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I started speaking like to the coffee shop owner and the bar that I went to and the guy who ran it, like, and was like, how did you do it? And these stories started coming out of being like, I threw everything at it. I've never done it before, but I know how to make good coffee and things like that, where I was like, and then that gave birth to the magazine, and telling these stories, and realized that the common denominator was not an MBA or a fancy business plan, but someone with a dream and the drive to make it happen.
Oh my God, I love that so much. Where to start? Where to start? I so connect with the Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins era. I had that same moment. I
Yeah.
was working in the corporate job and I bought the 4 Hour Work Week to read on this trip that I'd won
Yeah.
for work. And it was like I started reading it. I was like, what? You're telling me that you can just make up a business? Like this is a thing? But I've never ever been able to recapture that
Mm.
like epiphany moment, like, and that energy and that crazy,
Yeah.
like, oh my God moment. And so for the last decade of having my business, I've been like, how can I get back to that? How can I
Yeah.
find that like, oh my God, my life changed moment again?
It was, I think that it was, and I've had so many people be like, it'll never, startup creative will not work. Like people
What?
literally told me that. And people were like, yeah, startups don't have money. And, most businesses fail in the first 3 years, like all of that, like bullshit that gets
Mm,
thrown around.
mm,
But I think that like that era was the first time that people were like, you don't have to conform to the 9 to 5. And before
yeah.
that, it was kind of the, I mean, this is a bit stereotypical, but maybe like the hippies or, the people who are just like, no, I'm going off grid and, I'm going to sell things at markets, which is now a legitimate business, like the
Yeah.
finders keepers markets and all of those guys who, they're full of side hustlers and creatives. But yeah, it was and so I reckon the first 5 years of my business, like scrolling back through my Instagram and the content that I used to create was like, you can do this. Like, like,
Mm,
let's challenge the norm. Like we were brought up in a society that was based on the Industrial Revolution of like getting in line and being trained to work in factories and just follow rules. And largely, I think because of the privilege of the world that we live in now, we can start to design our futures and our careers a little bit more out of desire and passion rather than necessity.
yeah, you are spot on. And I noticed when I was doing some stalking in advance of this
Yes, we
podcast,
love a stalk.
yeah, that you do have a lot of content that is aimed to inspire people to just start.
Yep.
What does hold people back from actually starting a business or a side hustle or a freelance gig or whatever it might be?
I mean, it's fear, right? Like and it still happens for me. Like, and you're probably the same after 10 years in business, the risks get bigger, or you get comfortable with what you're doing,
Mm,
that to expand because you need a creative challenge or to do something different, requires you to step outside of your comfort zone. So I really love like studying the neuroscience of the brain and motivation and all of those things. And it's just the brain is wired for comfort. It is wired for familiar patterns and things that are the known, and that is a survival mechanism. And so going out on your own, actually, this research that I read a couple of years ago now, this whole idea of like imposter syndrome of feeling like you could never, right? And so, the imposter syndrome is feeling like if you go out on your own, you'll feel like an imposter and everyone will be like, how dare you do that? And tall poppy syndrome contributes to that, especially in Australia, I would say. But there was this science that was kind of saying, well, what if imposter syndrome was kind of like if you went out on your own, and you felt like an imposter, then you would return to the pack because the pack was stronger and you could stay safer. You had secured food and safety and shelter, and you weren't so exposed to risk and danger. And kind of challenging and being like, well, the risk and the danger that wanted to keep us with the pack is no longer there. And so like questioning, most of the time it's what will people think of us? It's mostly your friends and family. Like I'm like, I don't care what strangers think, but like what will that person that's from high school that's just started following me think that I'm doing this now? Or like.
Which always makes me laugh because who has time to think of anyone else? And maybe that's just the business owner in me who has no time to think of anybody
Mhm.
else. But then I always think, so if I have no time to think of anyone else, no one else is thinking of me or
Yeah.
paying that close of attention that I, should be embarrassed or should
Yeah.
worry about what they think.
And I think that the just start thing is like, I always like, I'm never going to be the person that's like, jump in and quit your job and do that unless that feels safe for you. Like, there's a challenge level that's right for everyone. So
Mhm.
the just start is start with what you can and where you're at, and start small and get a win on the board and let that then build your momentum. And I think that happens is that people go, oh, I can do that. Like,
Mm.
I can register a domain name. I can start an Instagram account and not tell anyone, or get a logo, or you know order some products online and test them out, or tell somebody that I'm a business coach and that, would can I practice on them. And once you start to get that evidence in you that you can do it, then you actually are, yeah, breaking down some of those barriers that stop people from starting.
Which is lovely. And back to your point around a decade ago
Yeah.
when it was the startup culture, burn the bridges, all in, hustle, 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 to now how lovely it is that
Mm.
we can just take the next step. We can just
Yeah.
put foot in front of the other, and that is actually success.
Yeah. And I think it's like the definition of like side hustle is not my favorite. Like, hustle is not a word that I've necessarily related to, but the publishers wanted it and it sells. um but it's not hustle. I guess it's something that the definition is something that you do on the side to your main income earner. And
Mm.
so I guess it does require hustle, and that you have to give up some free time for it. But the idea of it is that it's not meant to be this huge, big, scary risk, and that it's meant to be something that you can test out on the side. And once you prove that it's viable and that you like doing it, a lot of people miss that step, go like, oh, I've got this big idea. And then they start doing it. Like, I get this a lot with artists that I coach, who are like, start kind of going commercial, and then they're like, actually no, like that doesn't feel right. I want to go back to like me driving the ship.
Mm.
And so, yeah, people can have these big grand ideas, but when you start selling it, you might go, actually, I don't want to sell that, but I could sell this. And so you can pivot along the way.
Yeah, it reminds me, I remember back in the blogging era,
Oh yeah,
there was this
which is
guy that
coming back, by the way.
oh, totally, totally. It
Substack
never
is where it's
died.
at. Yeah.
Blogs are amazing. Great for SEO. I always
Yeah.
tell people like keep up a
Yeah.
but I remember this guy that used to teach starting a blog. He
Mm.
used to say, you need to show up and write 100 articles because you'll very quickly know at the end of 100 articles whether you care about the topic enough to keep showing up and
Yeah.
writing about it. And it does make me think about that. Like sometimes we shouldn't monetize our loves or our passions or our creative outlets, or sometimes you're right, we should test the model and see if it
Yeah.
does actually align to what we love doing. I know this in and of myself. There are services work. I've been in
Yeah.
services work for so long and I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And I keep selling it. And
Yeah.
I going to, you've got to sell the things that you love, you've
Yeah.
got to sell the things that you want to show up for, because
Yeah.
you do just show up with so much more energy for your customers when you actually enjoy what you do.
Yeah. And you attract customers with more ease when you're
Mm.
oozing that,
Yes.
and I've been through multiple different phases. Like, I know after about 4 years of startup creative and hustling and, doing the blog every Friday and the
Yeah.
email sequences and got to, started getting into meditation, and I was like, my business is irrelevant. I don't care. Like, it just like kind of like this spiritual awakening of being
I
like,
love
I'm
that.
shutting the whole thing down.
Did
And
it work?
yeah, no, well, I was on that, maybe this is a new, like, I think you need to refresh your business and make sure it's still
Mm.
keeping you alive.
Yeah.
And, wanting to offer, something completely new, and then being like, actually, what I'm good at is this. And
Mm.
it still wakes me up. But I often, like I do with coaching clients, sit down on a regular basis and I'm like, what is my dream business model? What do I love to do? What lights me up? And then I
Mm,
will look at what's coming up and, what I'm planning and
mm.
making sure that it aligns, because yeah, it's you have to do that for yourself. It's really hard to do that because otherwise you end up creating a 9 to 5 for yourself, which is, most of the reason why we got into this was to escape that.
It's such a good point because I feel like it's so easy to get trapped in the day to day
Yeah.
and the endless to do list and not actually taking that time to step back and reflect and
Mm,
look at kind of what is in front of you. And it
yeah.
makes me think as well, you know, some after a decade in business, some not even it doesn't even have to be that long. There are people potentially listening feeling like this only a few years in. Sometimes you don't have the energy that you
Yeah.
had in the first couple of months. Do you have any thoughts on what someone might do as a business owner to, I guess, reflect and
Yeah.
bring that energy back to their business?
I think zooming out on a regular basis is really good. Like, I personally schedule my week where I do coaching Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll do kind of podcast and meetings like Wednesdays, maybe Fridays, and
Mhm.
always try to keep Monday meeting free, because that's like the trauma of coming from a 9 to 5 where you had like the
Yes,
Sunday blues.
I
And
do the
so
same thing.
so I was like, you know what? A dream come true is no meetings on Mondays, and I'm never anxious on a Sunday night. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, I've got the day free, whatever unfolds. But that is where I brainstorm, and that's where I like come up with ideas and blog and create content. And so I think it should be something that you do regularly. And, similarly, even this conversation, it's finding people outside of you to reflect back what they like, what they don't like, what they think you're good at. Whether that's a peer or a group or, a meetup or a coach or whatever that is, like getting that outside perspective. And I think just constantly asking that question, like, what, like, again, another trending book when we started was Start With Why,
So
which
love
got
that.
completely like, I would say butchered. But yeah, when you really come back to the essence of that, it was like, and even when I was writing my book, I did research around, having purpose to what you do. And there's a lot of scientific research that shows when somebody has purpose attached to their goals, then they're more likely to achieve them. So starting with why you're starting, it is a motivator. So it is really important. So keep coming back and being like, for me, why did I start? It was freedom. So if I feel like my week is stacked and I'm like, I have no control over my diary, or I'm signing up for all of these things and I'm just like, eh, don't have time for friends and family, then that's not why I started. So yeah, you can then reschedule from there.
I love that. It's so interesting. Having that business vision connected to that why. I even think
Mm.
what I'm learning to do myself and telling people to do, my unsolicited advice, is also to connect tasks to that as
Mm.
well. So I do a lot of sales based coaching.
Yeah.
And one thing I say is most people hate sales admin, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm like, don't call it sales admin or don't call it
Yeah.
sales time. I'm like, call it freedom or,
Mm.
holiday with the kids in December or,
Yeah.
whatever it is, why ever you've got this side hustle or business or whatever, attribute that time that you may not like to that
Yeah.
why, to that bigger vision.
Yeah.
And it just, I think, helps sets you up for why am I doing this task?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
actually stepping me towards the dream that I have for my life.
Yeah, there's so many hacks. Like, Tony Robbins is very good for that. Was like my like what was it? What is, like, it's just a human motivation hacks that you can do. But yeah,
Mhm.
I did that. I had an online course that I was making at the end of last year, and I had a Japan trip booked with my fiance, and we were going to Japan to get engaged. And so I had like 8 weeks to like finish the
Mhm.
course, and I was like, I want to be
That's like
able
a
to
deadline.
I want to be able to leave my computer at home and not log into my website or anything. So I'm going to get this course up and done, and then my holiday equals freedom. So
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah.
And we're engaged. It all worked
We're
out.
engaged. Yep. We did an alternative engagement. We did a mutual agreement of being like, let's talk about what this means for us, and wrote speeches.
Oh my
Booked a
God, I
really
love
fancy
this.
hotel, and yeah.
This is awesome.
I know, it's great. People love the story, but I listened to this podcast, which is Power of Podcast,
Hmm.
where someone was, I think it was Bradley or something, the guy from, yeah, some famous guy,
Yeah.
where it was like, why is one person propose and then the other person's like, I have to make a decision, and it's just this one-sided thing. And we were like, yeah, that makes sense, because we were like, I don't know if marriage is for us. Anyway, then we were like, spent 3 months being like, what does engagement mean, and how do you feel about a family and buying houses and finances, and then we're like, okay, we're aligned. Let's book a holiday. We're going to go and get engaged, and we'll come back and tell everyone.
Oh my God, it's so cool. It's so genius. And I
Yeah.
actually just love, I know we're getting off topic here,
Yeah.
but I think it's good because so many times recently I'm hearing conversations and hearing about experiences people are having where they are engaged or married and they're finding things out about their partners that
Mm.
they've never talked about before. And and it's funny, I've got one of
Yeah.
those husbands who's like 1700 times chattier than I am. And so we talk about everything. But I know in a previous relationship that was very long term, like over a decade, wouldn't have been able to tell you much. Like we barely talked
Yeah.
about anything kind of real and, and long term. So it makes me realize that, yeah, I was one of those people that I could have
Yeah.
gotten married and never had known, well, until COVID, that they were an anti-vaxxer, things like that. And they go, and my husband is like, wouldn't you have known that? And I was like, no, it's not something we ever talked about. Like
Yeah.
all of these funny things. So I think just, being really intentional
Mm.
about communication and understanding each other is just so important. And it makes
Yeah.
life so much better. I love it.
Yeah. No, I'm such a chatter. I'm like, let's talk about everything. Like, yeah. And so it's been really nice. It's great.
That's so
It's a dream.
cool.
Yeah.
Ah, I love it. I love it. And we can loop this back to
Yeah.
business stats
Yeah.
with
We
with,
always bring it back.
with being intentional in your
Yes.
business. But I mean, it is, we were literally talking about that, like having those moments of reflection and asking yourself
Mm.
those questions. I think there is a nice crossover between
I
life
think
and business.
it's not to stretch it too far, but like I
Let's
would
do
say
it.
the crossover, saying out loud now, is the crossover as being like, everyone is doing it like this. What is an alternative way that
Yeah.
I can do it? And what is true to me, and
Mm,
what do I want as the customer, and
mm,
and how can I create something? Because one of the experiences that I had was that I was going to all these startup events, and they were in university boardrooms, and there was full of men with suits, and people just had business cards, just like handing them out left, right, and center. I was like, what do you do? How can what can I get from you? And
mm,
I would come home from those events, and my partner at the time, an
mm.
ex, and was like, how was the event? I was like, I hated it. Like, I'm drained. Like, I felt really anxious. I would wear kind of businessy things to try and fit in,
Yeah.
that were not like a beanie and a jumper, like, and drinking wine.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember my partner at the time being like, well, just create your own. Like, you hate that. And so I started putting on these events. And the first event that I ever put on, well, 170 people turned up. And
Wow.
we had it sponsored, and we had food trucks and like all the speakers and musicians. And so it was like food trucks, musicians, some beer sponsors, and a panel about business. And that
Yeah.
was like groundbreaking.
Mind
Like,
blowing.
oh
Yeah.
my God, like this is wild. It's something I actually want to be at and would
Yeah.
go to. There's not one business suit there, like, and it's just creatives everywhere having a great time. Dim lighting, like no neon lighting. Um, but to bring it back is that I think that what you can do really well in business is to go, that was authentic to me. Like,
Mm.
what is authentic to me in my engagement and also in how I want to do business? And if you can't find it, then you can create your own version of it.
Yeah, look,
Mm.
and that's why we drink
Yeah.
wine in the podcast.
Yes, I'm here
Like,
for it.
I really like chatting to awesome women in business and drinking wine. I'm gonna build a business around that.
100%. Yeah. We did a creatives dinner last year in Sydney, and I'd had I think about 15 women in creative businesses who were like, "Let's catch up. We should catch up." And I was like, it out of like necessity of being like, I don't have time for all of these people, but also you should all meet. And so I just said, "Hey, do you guys all want to go for dinner?" And we ended up putting on this like we just all went to a restaurant and got like, $80 a head, and everyone just connected, and I was like, "Great." It was awesome.
It's so good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's game changer.
Yeah, but it is interesting because I think you're right. There is sometimes a bit of a rule book on how things should
Yeah.
be done. And I fell victim to that with my first business, Scrunch, which is an influencer marketing platform.
Mm.
So it was a tech platform. So a decade
Yeah,
ago, tech, it was startup hustle culture, build a team,
yeah,
raise capital, blah, blah, blah. And I did get to this stage where, and I even remember I was kind of wearing clothes similar to my corporate career. And I just got to this stage where I was like, this sucks.
yeah,
And I was like, well, you're the boss.
yeah.
You're the only one that can
Like,
change.
why? Why am I doing this? Yeah,
Totally. And I think it's not until you actually step back and ask yourself and be intentional, that you can actually design something that you love working
yeah,
and love showing up each day for.
yeah.
Because it
And
is
it
hard. You do have to like find something that you love.
Yeah, and but research shows you'll be
Mm,
more successful at it because you care, and it's going to get hard and it's going to be shitty, and there are going to be, sales admin that you don't want to do, but if you can connect it to why am I doing this and the
mm,
bigger picture, then you're going to show up and push through. So yeah, I think it's really important to find the intention behind it because there are so many business ideas, and when if someone ever says to me like, I've got this idea, but like, no shade, but like sometimes people will be like, sign an NDA, and
mm,
before coaching and stuff, and I'm like, of course, but I've probably heard it before because I've coached, I would say, close to 2,000 people over the last 10 years across the world with lots of different ideas. So, and also you read about them on the internet, but um, there's no shortage of great business ideas. The shortage of people who are willing to take the risk and to stick at it and to bring it to life.
Would you have any advice for someone who might be going through said shitty times on how to keep going?
Yeah, I think also take a break. Like sometimes you need to just stop and zoom out and be like, shit, like where did this go wrong? Or like what's going wrong? What am I liking? What aren't I liking? Like really health check it.
Yeah.
Zoom out as much as you can. And if you can't physically zoom out, because sometimes part of the shittiness is that you're just so blurry, then ask someone else to help you zoom out, and don't
Mm,
be afraid to take advice. I think getting an outside perspective and getting people to see what you can't see is really, really important. Um, I think taking care of yourself, like peeling back to the bare minimum. If you just need to do what you need to do to make money and keep your business afloat, then that's okay. And give yourself that grace. And then
mm,
figure out, is it your sleep? Is it your health? Is it, for me, like, I was it the beginning of 2023? Maybe, yeah. It was just like, yeah, I was in a bit of a funk, and I was like, I need to start exercising regularly. I need to like, I was moving house. So I started going to the library to just like get myself to an office because I didn't have my at-home office in between houses. Yeah, and create routine and structure for myself because that was grounding and safety. Um, but yeah, don't be afraid to like, kind of like put it all down and
mm,
then take a look at it and see what needs to be picked back up. Like the reason I don't do my magazine at the moment is it used to cost me a lot of money and cause me a lot of stress, but it gave me a lot of cred and it got me a lot of meetings. Like it was in the Virgin lounges, and it was, you could have a meeting, write to anyone and say, do you want to be my magazine? And most people are like, yes, I want to see myself in print.
Yes.
So it got you through a lot of doors, but I realized actually I need to take a break from this, which was like right before COVID. And then the book, I ended up writing a book anyway. So, but yeah, it was a big ego thing to put it down and to actually question why I kept pushing through with this really stressful thing.
I love that because I think sometimes business owners are a little overachievers.
Yeah.
So our go-to is if I just push harder, I will
Yeah.
come out the other side.
Yeah.
But I feel like that is not always the case.
No, because nothing changes if nothing changes, and you can't see what you don't know,
Mm,
like you can't see what you can't see. And so if what you're doing isn't working, then you need a fresh perspective.
mm,
And sometimes that fresh perspective, like I remember actually, it was even a few months ago, I was like, yeah, grinding away at work and just got into that hustle mentality that happens where you just like must keep going, must sit at my desk. And my partner was like, let's have a day. She has Mondays off. So we were like, let's go to the beach. And so we went and spent a day on the beach on a Monday. There was no reception, beautiful, stunning day, and then came back into reception. And I had this, and this is a bit, I don't know, maybe it's a bit woo woo, but I'm going to use it as an
I'm here
analogy.
for it.
But I
Yep.
had an email from Canva saying, are you available to come in for a talk and do it and be on a panel? And I was like, yes, I am. And I was like, that came like just trusting that, yeah, I've got the blog and I've got the podcast and I've got a reputation and I've got all of these things. And it was, I think for me, it was this reminder, and I've reminded myself of it a few times, is sometimes stopping and completely taking your attention off your business and resetting and going to a gallery or to a beach or reading a book actually sparks new ideas and new perspectives. And you start to see things differently. But when you just sit and grind at the same old thing, trying to, solve the problem with the same solutions that haven't been working,
Mm.
um, that's the definition of insanity. So, yeah, sometimes stopping and stepping away actually is the best thing you can do. It's very, very hard to do. But every time I do it, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I do this sooner? But
Yeah, I feel like I always push myself to the breaking point
oh yeah.
and go, I'm having a mental breakdown right now. I better like get in a bath with a book and sort that out. And it's just like within minutes, things start to like shift and change. And I'm like, what is wrong with you?
Mm,
You know that this works. You know stopping works.
yeah,
And I'm like, and I'm 10 years in and I still
yeah,
can't bloody learn the lesson.
yeah. But also it's a sign that we care and we love it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I love it so much. I feel like we could talk all day, but
we really could.
so let's Lee, I always love to, and look, we've doled out a lot of advice
Yeah.
today, but reflecting on your time in business,
Mm,
would there be a piece of advice that maybe you got or that you've learned over the time that you would offer up to another woman in business who, yeah, to help her on her journey?
yeah. Oh, there's so much. I would say advice from the last 10 years is to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And sometimes that'll be giant leaps, and sometimes that will be like a centimeter of an inch forward. And but they pay off. Like another quote that I rinse and repeat is, a year from now you'll wish you started today.
Mhm.
And if you start today with something, even if it's a commitment to blogging or starting a business, or financial freedom to leave your job, whatever it is, right? One thing every day for the next 365 days is 365 things, because I think we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And
Mm.
so the accumulation of tiny things pays off. Like that consistency is like, you're not under like this I've had it so many times where, I say awaken the dream, where you kind of like, you just put your head down, you're doing one thing, one thing, one thing, and then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, holy shit, I'm living it, like it's here. So really that compounding interest of one thing. Um, yeah, I think that definitely would be my number one piece of advice. But yeah, and also like love yourself and back yourself, and yeah, do that work on yourself, because there's going to be those days where you have to believe in yourself and really check yourself as well. So
That's so beautiful. I couldn't
mm,
agree with you more. I know, even on the days where I'm struggling to show up, so I have this
mm,
list. I don't even know what I call it, like my bite-size list.
yeah,
It's like on the days where I can't do it. I know I just can't show up today,
yeah,
but I'll have like things that take me literally 3 minutes or
yeah,
5 minutes. So I'm like, well, if I do that and that's all
mm,
it takes me is 5 minutes, then I've at least stepped forward today,
yeah,
least done something.
yeah,
And because you're so right, it is like,
yeah,
going viral doesn't happen. Like life doesn't change overnight. Like
yeah,
it is all of those tiny accumulations.
yeah.
So I think you were just
There's yeah,
right.
there's so many examples where like I just leave you on one is when I started my magazine, somebody brought another magazine to me and was like, "Look, this magazine's out." And I was like, "I should not have started this magazine. Like, they're better than me. They've got more money than me. Like, they've got higher production. Like, and I was like, no, I don't want to, like, what, like, don't take it out of my side.
Yeah.
And then as we were relaunching our fifth version of the magazine and nearly broke me, like the week before it went to launch, that magazine that I thought was so much better than me, and I nearly didn't start my magazine because of it, became shut down.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, that we've kind of got the space here now. And it was just that reminder of like staying in the game is so much more important. And also just don't be afraid to listen to feedback as well and pivot and like, yeah, take take it as it comes.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, it's so funny. I know we're wrapping up here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it just reminded me. I remember when we were starting Scrunch, I don't know what was with people, but every other influencer marketing platform or anything related to influencer marketing, they'd be, oh, have you seen this? Oh, have you seen this? I was like, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to like cramp my style here?
Yeah.
But I really had to ignore it. I really had
Mm.
to be like, we will be different. We will hold space
Mm.
for ourselves. There is space for everybody. And I think that's
Yeah.
something I've like, you often hear people say as well, like, oh, well, somebody else is already doing that.
Yeah.
Well, they're not doing it in the way that you would,
Right. Yeah.
you know, and customers are infinite, money is infinite, there is room for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I love
Yeah.
your
Focus
sentiment
on what you can
about
do.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Amazing.
my God, Kate, you're amazing.
Ah,
Thank
you're
you
amazing.
so
Thanks so much
much.
for chatting.
Anytime.
Takes a great boss woman to know one. So mm,
I love it. No, I know that everyone will have walked away with many nuggets of wisdom. So thank you so much for your
my
time.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.